I sat in my car outside the design studio for 15 minutes, staring at the half-finished logo mock-up glowing on my laptop screen. 26 years old and still finding myself paralyzed by the ping of every text notification. The blue light from the monitor cast shadows across my hands, making them look almost ghostly. Maya's voice still echoed from our call an hour ago. "You need to report this to someone, Catherine. He was outside your building again." She was right. Julian had been waiting across the street from my apartment that morning, standing beneath the broken streetlight with that look he always wore when he thought he was being romantic. The restraining order was just paper to him. 4 months since I'd ended things, and he still acted like I'd made a mistake he could fix. The police had been patient the first 2 times I called. By the 4th violation, I could hear the shift in their tone. Sympathetic, but stretched thin. They'd send a patrol car, Julian would vanish into the evening, and 2 days later, the cycle would start again. I closed the laptop and grabbed my bag, the canvas strap already frayed from anxious fidgeting. The October rain had finally stopped, but the parking garage still smelled like wet concrete and motor oil. Most of my coworkers had left before sunset, but I'd stayed late revising client files. Productivity as procrastination. The truth was, I didn't want to go home to my studio apartment, where every creak in the hallway made me think of Julian trying my doorknob at 2 a.m. last week. My fingers trembled as I pulled my keys from my pocket. Get a grip, Thorne. I slipped into the driver's seat and hit the lock button twice, a reflex I'd developed over the past 4 months. The car smelled like the lavender sachet hanging from my rearview mirror and the energy drink I'd spilled last Tuesday. I turned the ignition and the engine coughed to life with its usual reluctant rattle. Maya called again as I merged onto the main street. "Hey," I answered, pressing the phone between my cheek and shoulder. "I'm driving home now." "Did you file another report?" "Not yet. I'll do it tomorrow morning." She exhaled slowly, that specific sound that meant she was disappointed but not surprised. "Catherine, ignoring this won't make it stop. Julian isn't going to wake up one day and decide to move on." "I know." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I just need to get home and finish those revisions." I can't think about him right now. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. You need to think about yourself. Marcus and I have that guest room. You could stay with us until things calm down. The offer made my throat tight. Maya and her fiancé had already done so much, helping me pack when I first left Julian, screening my emails, walking me to my car after late shifts. I couldn't keep pulling them into this. "I'll be okay, I promise. I'll text you when I'm inside." "You better." We ended the call, and I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat next to my bag. The road ahead stretched dark and slick, the asphalt still gleaming from the earlier storm. Rush hour had cleared out, leaving only scattered vehicles making their way through the autumn night. I took the route toward the river, a path I'd driven 100 times without thinking. The North Side Bridge came into view, its iron skeleton silhouetted against the charcoal clouds. I used to like crossing this bridge in the evening, watching the city lights shimmer on the water below. But tonight, something felt off. A pressure had settled in my chest, heavy and insistent. Like my body knew something my mind refused to acknowledge. "Stop. You're being paranoid. Julian isn't following you." Except he had followed me before. 2 weeks ago, I'd spotted his black Lexus 3 cars behind me for 20 minutes before he finally turned into a gas station. When I'd confronted him through text later, he'd said he was just driving around. Like we happened to be driving around the same neighborhood at the same time by coincidence. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel as I started across the bridge. Below me, the river churned dark and turbulent, swollen from days of rain. There were only 3 other cars visible, one far ahead already disappearing around the bend, another several car lengths behind me, and one approaching from the opposite direction. Then everything shattered. The sound came first, a deafening bang that made my entire body jolt. The car lurched hard to the right, and I instinctively wrenched the wheel left, trying to compensate. But the vehicle didn't respond. Instead, it spun, the rear tires sliding wide across the wet pavement. "No, no, please." The words tumbled out in a gasp as I fought for control. The steering wheel jerked uselessly in my hands. The blown tire, front right, based on the way the car was pulling, made every attempt to correct the skid completely futile. I hammered the brake pedal, but the slick road offered no grip. The world became a chaotic swirl of headlights and darkness as the car hydroplaned toward the guardrail. Metal shrieked as my sedan collided with the barrier. The corroded railing gave way like it had been waiting to fail, and suddenly the ground disappeared beneath me. Time splintered into fractured seconds. My stomach lurched as gravity seized control. The black water below rushed up toward me, and some primal part of my brain screamed one word: out. My hands scrabbled for the seatbelt release. Get out, get out, get out! The buckle clicked open, and I lunged for the door handle with one hand while bracing against the console with the other. The car pitched forward, angling nose first toward the river. I shoved the door open against the resistance of the wind, and freezing air slammed into my face. The vehicle was falling, and I threw myself sideways, half crawling, half dragging my body out of the driver's seat. My ribs hit the door frame hard enough to knock the air from my lungs, and then I was scrambling across rain-slicked metal. The car continued its plunge, and I reached frantically for anything solid. My fingers caught the edge of jagged concrete where the guardrail had broken away. The impact rattled through my shoulders and nearly ripped my hands loose. I screamed, the sound swallowed by wind and rain, as my body swung out over nothing. My legs kicked at empty air, at the vast darkness of the river waiting to swallow me whole. The car hit the water with a muffled explosion I felt in my bones. Icy spray erupted upward, soaking my jeans and boots. I hung there, fingers white and shaking against the rough concrete, every muscle burning as I tried to pull myself up. But I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough. Headlights suddenly cut through the rain and darkness. A car had stopped where mine had torn through the barrier. I heard a door slam, then the sound of boots hitting pavement at a run. "Hold on!" A man's voice, low and sharp with command. I couldn't turn my head to see who was speaking. Every ounce of focus I had left was channeled into keeping my fingers locked around that concrete edge. My grip was failing. The rain made everything slippery, and my strength was draining by the second. Then powerful hands closed around my wrists like iron shackles. "I have you," the voice said. Much closer now. "Don't let go." As if I could. The grip tightened, and I felt myself being hauled upward with shocking, effortless power. Whoever this man was, he pulled me up like I weighed nothing at all. My chest scraped across the broken concrete edge, and then I was tumbling onto solid asphalt, gasping and shaking uncontrollably. I lay there for a long moment, unable to process anything beyond the fact that I was alive. My body felt distant and numb, adrenaline and shock, disconnecting my mind from physical sensation. Rain poured down on my face, mixing with tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "Are you injured?" The voice again, urgent but controlled, not panicked, just focused. I managed to turn my head. Through the haze of shock and the glare of his car's headlights, I saw him, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that looked expensive, even soaked with rain. His face was half in shadow, but I caught the gleam of his eyes, dark and intense, almost black, in the strange mix of light and storm. His jaw was set, his expression unreadable, but somehow concerned. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. He crouched beside me, one hand still resting protectively on my shoulder, as if he was afraid I might slip away again, even here on solid ground. And in that moment, shaking, terrified, and completely at the mercy of a stranger who'd just saved my life, I had no idea that the man kneeling beside me was Lorenzo Costello, or that he would never let me go. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. Not a hospital. The walls were too elegant, painted in soft cream with crown molding that looked hand-carved. The bed beneath me felt like expensive linen, not scratchy hospital sheets. My ribs ached where I'd hit the door frame, and my shoulders burned from hanging off that bridge, but nothing felt broken. The door opened, and he walked in. Lorenzo. I'd learned his name somewhere between the bridge and this room, though the details were hazy. He carried himself like someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. "You're awake." He set a glass of water on the nightstand. "My doctor examined you while you were resting. Bruised ribs, strained shoulders. You're lucky." Lucky. I'd almost drowned in a river, but sure, lucky. "My car," I started, "is at the bottom of the North Side River." He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, his movements precise and controlled. "But that's not what you should be worried about." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. Security footage, grainy, but clear enough. A figure in dark clothing crouched beside my car in the design studio parking garage, doing something to the front tire. "Your tire didn't blow out from wear or a puncture," Lorenzo said, his voice flat. "Someone cut into the sidewall, weakened it just enough that it would fail under pressure, like driving across a bridge." My hands started shaking again. That's impossible. The guardrail was tampered with, too." He swiped to another image, close-up photos of clean cuts in the metal supports. "Whoever planned this knew exactly where you'd be driving. They wanted you to go through that barrier." The room tilted. Someone had tried to kill me. Not scare me, not threaten me, actually kill me. "Who?" But I already knew. The word came out like broken glass. "Julian." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. "My team is tracking him now. He's been following you for weeks. We pulled footage from 3 different locations." He paused. "But there's something else you need to know." I waited, my heart hammering against my bruised ribs. "Julian didn't do this alone," Lorenzo said quietly. "He's been working with people, dangerous people. People who don't stop once they've decided on a target." "Why are you helping me?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "You don't even know me." For a moment, something unreadable crossed his face. Then he leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "I know you now," he said, "and no one touches what's under my protection." Lorenzo's estate looked like something out of a Gothic novel. Iron gates that required a security code, surveillance cameras hidden in the trees, lining the long driveway, and a stone mansion that sprawled across the property like it had been standing there for centuries. It hadn't. Everything about this place was deliberate, designed. "You'll stay in the East Wing," Lorenzo said as we pulled up to the front entrance. "No one gets past the gate without clearance." I should have argued. Should have insisted I could go to Maya's or a hotel, or anywhere that wasn't the home of a man I'd known for less than 24 hours. But the images of those clean cuts in my guardrail kept flashing through my mind. Julian had tried to kill me, and according to Lorenzo, Julian had help. A woman met us at the door, mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "You must be Catherine," she said warmly, like I was an expected guest and not someone fleeing for her life. "I'm Rosa. I manage the house." "Rosa's been with my family for 30 years, Lorenzo said. "You can trust her." Over the next hour, I met the rest of them. Marco, head of security, who looked like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. Elena, the housekeeper, who immediately offered to wash the clothes I'd been wearing since the bridge. Even the gardener, Antonio, who waved at me through the window while trimming hedges that probably cost more than my rent. They all treated Lorenzo with a strange mix of respect and genuine affection, not fear, loyalty. That evening, I found Lorenzo in a room I hadn't expected, a small private chapel tucked away on the ground floor, lit only by candles and the fading sunset through stained glass windows. He knelt at the altar, head bowed, hands clasped. I started to back away, but he spoke without turning. "You can come in." I hesitated in the doorway. I didn't mean to interrupt. "You're not." He stood, brushing off his knees, and for the first time since pulling me off that bridge, he looked softer, younger, almost. My mother used to pray here. After she died, I kept the tradition. I stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under my feet. I wouldn't have guessed you were religious. I'm not. A slight smile touched his lips, barely there. But I believe in keeping promises. My mother made me promise I'd never stop fighting for what mattered. His dark eyes found mine across the candlelight. So I don't. The weight of his words settled between us. Why me? I asked quietly. You don't owe me anything. He moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. Maybe I'm tired of watching people fall, he said. Or maybe the moment I grabbed your hand, I knew I wasn't letting go. My breath caught. Either way, Catherine, Lorenzo continued, his voice low and steady, you're safe here. I promise you that. And somehow, standing in that chapel with a man I barely knew, I believed him. 3 days later, I convinced Lorenzo to let me return to work. Marco drove me in an armored SUV, waiting in the parking garage, while I went upstairs to collect my files and explain my absence to my boss. I needed something normal, something that reminded me I had a life before all of this. The design studio felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a place you'd left years ago instead of days. My coworkers asked careful questions about the accident, and I gave careful answers. Car trouble, staying with a friend. Everything's fine now. I was packing my laptop when I saw him through the office window. Julian stood across the street, hands in his pockets, staring directly at the building. Directly at me. My hands froze on the laptop case. He smiled, that same charming smile he used to give me when we were together. The one that used to make me feel special. Now it just made my skin crawl. I pulled out my phone and texted Marco. He's here. The response came immediately. Stay inside. I'm coming up. But Julian was already moving, not toward the building, away from it. A black sedan pulled up beside him, and he climbed into the passenger seat. Before the car pulled away, I caught a glimpse of the driver, older, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit. Marco burst through the office door 30 seconds later, his hand resting on something beneath his jacket. Where? Gone. I pointed to where the sedan had been. He got into a car with someone. Marco's expression darkened. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Boss, we have a problem. Back at the estate. Lorenzo stood in his office reviewing security footage Marco had pulled from nearby cameras. The silver-haired man's face filled the screen, and Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Luca Santoro, he said quietly, the youngest son of the Santoro family. Who are they? I asked, though something in his tone told me I didn't want to know. Rivals. Lorenzo turned to face me. They've been trying to move into my territory for months. Every shipment disrupted, every deal undermined. He paused, his dark eyes hard. I thought it was just business, but Julian connected them to you. The pieces clicked together in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. They used him. They are using him. Lorenzo moved closer, his voice dropping. Julian gave them a way to hurt me, by hurting you. But I'm nobody, I whispered. You're not nobody. His hand caught my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. Not anymore. The moment I pulled you off that bridge, the moment I brought you here, you became something they can use against me. My stomach dropped. I'm leverage. You're under my protection, Lorenzo corrected, his voice fierce. Which makes you valuable. Which makes you a target. His thumb brushed across my cheek, surprisingly gentle. And which means I won't let you out of my sight again. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the estate, casting long shadows across the grounds. Somewhere in the city, Julian and the Santoros were planning their next move. and I was standing at the center of a war I never asked to fight. Maya's name lit up my phone at 2 in the morning. I grabbed it before the second ring, my heart already racing. She never called this late. Catherine. Her voice was shattered, barely recognizable through the tears. They took Marcus. They took him, and I don't know where. Slow down. I sat up, my hands shaking. Who took him? Men. They broke into our house an hour ago. They knew your name. They said, her voice cracked. They said if Lorenzo Costello wants you back, he needs to come to the old waterfront warehouse on Pier 7, alone, by dawn. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. Lorenzo appeared in my doorway seconds later, already dressed, his expression dark and controlled. He'd heard everything. The walls in this house were thick, but apparently not thick enough to muffle a call that changed everything. I'll get him back, he said simply. Maya was still crying on the other end. I told her to go to the police, to stay somewhere safe, and ended the call with promises I wasn't sure anyone could keep. This is my fault. I stood in Lorenzo's office, watching his security team assemble downstairs through the window. Men in tactical gear, checking weapons, moving with military precision. Marcus is innocent. He has nothing to do with any of this. It's the Santoros' fault, Lorenzo said, his voice hard as iron. They chose to take an innocent man. They chose to use him as bait. Because of me. The words tasted bitter. If I hadn't come here, if I hadn't pulled you off that bridge, you'd be dead. He turned to face me, his dark eyes blazing. Julian and the Santoros would have killed you that night. At least this way, you're alive. Marcus will be alive. And the Santoros will learn what happens when they threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made something in my chest tighten. Downstairs, Lorenzo's office had transformed into a war room, maps spread across the desk, red circles marking the warehouse and surrounding streets. Marco stood at attention, his expression grim. They'll have snipers, Marco said, pointing to elevated positions. This is a trap. They want you dead, boss. I know. Lorenzo's voice was calm, almost casual. That's why we're not walking into it. He outlined the plan with brutal efficiency. Teams moving in from 3 directions, cutting off escape routes, overwhelming them with numbers and firepower. This wasn't a rescue operation. This was an execution. I watched him transform from the man who'd prayed in the chapel to something else entirely, something cold and calculating and absolutely lethal. What about Marcus? I asked quietly. Lorenzo's eyes met mine across the room. I'll bring him home, he said. I promise you. Then he strapped on a shoulder holster, checked his weapon, and walked toward the door. Lorenzo, I called after him. He paused, looking back. Come back, I whispered. Please come back. His expression softened for just a moment. Always, he said. Then he was gone, and all I could do was wait. I wasn't supposed to be there. Lorenzo had been clear. Stay at the estate, stay safe, let him handle it. But Marco's radio was still transmitting when they moved in, and Rosa didn't stop me from listening in the security room. The first shots shattered the pre-dawn silence at exactly 4:47 a.m. North team in position. Marco's voice crackled through the speaker. We have visual on 2 hostages, Marcus Reeves and 1 other. My breath caught. 2 hostages. Who else had they taken? South team moving, another voice reported. Smoke deployed. Then everything erupted. The gunfire came in rapid bursts, overlapping and echoing through the radio static. I heard shouting in Italian, the crash of breaking glass, the metallic bang of breaching doors. Rosa stood beside me, her hand gripping my shoulder, her lips moving in silent prayer. Hostages secured, Marco's voice cut through the chaos. Boss has them. We're moving out. Santoro men surrendering, someone else called. We've got 4, no, 5 in custody. But Lorenzo's voice was what I was waiting for. When it finally came through, low and controlled, my knees nearly buckled with relief. The package is safe, heading back. They arrived as the sun broke over the horizon, casting the estate in gold and shadow. 3 black SUVs rolled through the gates, and I was already running down the front steps before they'd fully stopped. Marcus stumbled out of the second vehicle, shaken but alive. Maya had been called and was on her way. But my eyes were searching for someone else. Lorenzo emerged from the lead SUV, his dark coat torn at the shoulder, a cut above his eyebrow still bleeding. But he was walking, he was whole, and when his eyes found mine, something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. I didn't think. I just ran. He caught me easily, his arms wrapping around me like I was something precious he'd almost lost. I felt his heart hammering against my cheek, smelled gunpowder and smoke and something metallic I didn't want to identify. "You came back," I whispered against his chest. "I promised." His hand cradled the back of my head, his voice rough. "I always keep my promises." Behind us, Marco was helping Marcus inside while other team members escorted 5 handcuffed Santoro men toward the basement. One of them was Luca Santoro himself, his silver hair disheveled, his expensive suit torn and bloodied, but I couldn't focus on any of that. All I could focus on was Lorenzo, solid and real and alive in my arms. "The other hostage?" I asked quietly. "Who was it?" Lorenzo's expression darkened. "Your ex-boyfriend's brother. They were using him as insurance." He paused. "Julian was there too. We have him." My entire world tilted. "He's in the holding room," Lorenzo continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "and he's going to tell us everything." The basement of Lorenzo's estate was nothing like the elegant rooms above. Concrete walls, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and the smell of damp stone mixed with something darker. Fear, maybe. Or blood. Julian sat in a metal chair in the center of the room, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. He looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing. The man who'd stalked me for months, who'd made me afraid to go home, who'd tried to kill me, he looked pathetic. Lorenzo stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Marco was positioned by the door, his hand resting casually on his weapon. They'd given me this moment. This choice. I could walk away and never see Julian again, or I could face him. I stepped forward. Julian's head snapped up, and something like relief flooded his battered face. "Catherine, thank God. You have to tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" The words came out sharp and cold. "You cut my tire. You sabotaged the guardrail. You tried to drown me in that river." "No." He strained against the zip ties, desperate. "That wasn't supposed to happen. They said they'd just scare you, make you realize you needed me. I never wanted you to actually get hurt." I stared at him, this man I'd once trusted, once loved in some naive, broken way. "You're lying." "I'm not." His voice cracked, raw and pleading. "I loved you, Catherine. I still love you. When you left me, I lost everything. My job, my apartment, my whole life fell apart because you couldn't see that we belonged together." Behind me, Lorenzo shifted slightly. I felt his presence like a shield at my back, solid and unwavering. "So you joined the Santoros," I said quietly. "You allied yourself with criminals because I broke up with you." Julian's face twisted, oscillating between rage and desperation. "They found me. After you got that restraining order, after everyone started looking at me like I was some kind of monster, they approached me, said they knew someone who could help me get you back." "Luca Santoro." "Yes." The admission came out defeated. He said Lorenzo Costello had been making problems for their family, that if I helped them hurt Costello, they'd help me with you. They said Costello was dangerous, that he'd eventually come after you himself, and I'd be there to save you. You'd finally see that I was the good guy. I felt sick. "So you fed them information, told them where I worked, where I lived, what route I drove home." "They were just supposed to watch you." Julian's voice rose, frantic and thin. "That's what Luca promised. Surveillance. Then when the time was right, they'd arrange something, an incident, and I'd be there to help you. You'd be grateful. You'd remember why you loved me." "But it escalated," Lorenzo said from behind me, his voice like cold steel. "They decided I was too much of a threat, so they turned your surveillance into an assassination attempt." Julian's face crumpled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know they'd go that far. When I heard about the bridge, when I saw the news footage of your car being pulled from the river. His voice broke entirely. I thought you were dead. I thought I'd killed you. Tears streamed down his face now, mixing with the blood from his split lip. He looked at me like I was supposed to comfort him, like I was supposed to absolve him of trying to murder me because he hadn't meant for it to go quite that far. But you didn't stop, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. Even after the bridge. You kept working with them. They took Marcus, an innocent man who only ever tried to help me get away from you. They said if I helped them grab Costello, they'd let me go. They'd give me enough money to disappear, start over somewhere new. Julian's eyes locked onto mine, wild and pleading. I just wanted it to end, Catherine. I just wanted you to see— What? I stepped closer, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. See that you're obsessed? That you're willing to destroy innocent lives because you can't accept that I don't want you? You did want me, he shouted, straining forward against his restraints. You loved me once. We were happy. If you'd just given me another chance, I gave you a dozen chances. My voice dropped to something cold and final. Every time you show up drunk at my door, every time you screamed at me for talking to male coworkers, every time you told me I was nothing without you, I gave you chances until I had nothing left to give. Julian stared at me, his face a portrait of denial and desperate longing. And in that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. Not as the man I'd once dated, not as the dangerous stalker who'd haunted my life for months. Just as someone broken and small who'd convinced himself that obsession was love. I don't love you, I said quietly. I don't think I ever really did. I loved who I thought you were, but that person was never real. Something died in his eyes. The last fragile hope he'd been clinging to shattered, and what remained was just empty desperation. Catherine, please. You're done, Lorenzo said, pushing off the wall and moving to stand beside me. Marco, take him to the authorities. Attempted murder, conspiracy, kidnapping. Let the police sort out the rest. Julian started screaming then, thrashing against his restraints, shouting my name, over and over like a prayer or a curse. Marco hauled him up effortlessly, dragging him toward the door while he begged and sobbed and swore. He'd never meant for any of this to happen. The door slammed shut, muffling his cries. I stood there in the sudden silence, trembling but whole. Lorenzo's hand found mine, warm and steady and real. It's over, he said softly. I looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd saved my life and fought a war to keep me safe. Is it? His dark eyes held mine, fierce and protective, and something else I was only beginning to understand. The Santoros still need to answer for what they've done, he said. But Julian, he'll never touch you again. And finally, after months of fear and running and looking over my shoulder, I believed it. I was free. I found Lorenzo in the chapel 3 hours after they'd taken Julian away. The candles were lit again, casting flickering shadows across the stained glass. But he wasn't praying. He stood at the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the estate grounds bathed in afternoon light. He didn't turn when I entered, but his shoulders shifted slightly, acknowledging my presence without words. Marcus is home safe, I said quietly, stopping a few feet behind him. Maya called. They're leaving the city for a while, staying with her parents upstate until things settle. Smart. His voice was rough, tired in a way I hadn't heard before. The Santoros won't trouble them again. I've made that very clear. I wanted to ask what he meant by that, what he'd done to Luca Santoro and his men after I'd left the holding room, but part of me already knew, and another part didn't need the confirmation. You should go with them, Lorenzo said, still not turning around. Maya and Marcus, get out of the city. Start fresh somewhere the Costello name doesn't cast a shadow. My heart stopped. You're sending me away? I'm giving you a choice. He finally turned, and the exhaustion in his dark eyes made my chest ache. You came into my life because someone tried to kill you. I pulled you into a war you never asked to fight, Julian's confession doesn't change the fact that you're only in danger because of me. That's not true. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. I was in danger because of Julian, because of Santoros. You saved me. And then I made you a target. His jaw tightened, something painful flickering across his face. Catherine, I've spent my entire life in this world. Violence, power, control, it's all I know. But you? His voice softened, almost reverent. You're light in a place that's only ever been dark, and I have no right to keep you here. What if I want to stay? The words hung between us like a confession. Lorenzo stared at me, something dangerous and desperate warring in his expression. You don't know what you're saying, he said roughly. This life, my life, it's not safe, it's not normal. There will always be another enemy, another threat, another fight. I know. I closed the distance between us, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. I've spent the last 4 months living in fear. Afraid to go home, afraid to sleep, afraid every shadow was Julian waiting to hurt me. And then you pulled me off that bridge, and for the first time in months, I felt safe. His hand lifted, hesitating just inches from my face like he was afraid to touch me, afraid I'd disappear if he did. You feel safe with a man like me? His voice was barely a whisper. I feel safe with you. I caught his hand, pressing his palm against my cheek. Not because of what you are, because of who you are. You kept your promises. You protected my friends. You gave me a choice when you could have just decided for me. Lorenzo's thumb brushed across my cheekbone, his touch achingly gentle for a man capable of such violence. I told myself I'd let you go, he said quietly, that I'd make sure you were safe and then step back. But Catherine, I'm not strong enough. The moment I grabbed your hand on that bridge, something in me knew I'd never be able to let go. Then don't. My voice cracked, raw with emotion I'd been holding back for days. Don't let go. His other hand cupped my face, and he leaned his forehead against mine. His breath warm against my lips. If you stay, I will spend every day making sure you never fall again, he said, fierce and solemn. I will build walls around you that no one can breach. I will burn down anyone who tries to hurt you. And I will never, ever let you face the darkness alone. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but they weren't born from fear or pain. They were something else entirely, relief, hope. The terrifying, exhilarating realization that I was choosing this, choosing him. I don't need walls, Lorenzo, I whispered. I just need you. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of unspoken promises. His arms wrapped around me like I was something precious he'd fought a war to keep. And maybe I was. Maybe we both were. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible moment and somehow made it mean something. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his hand over my heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath his palm. Stay with me, he said simply, not a command, a request. Yes. Later, as the sun set over the estate and cast the chapel in gold and crimson light, Lorenzo led me back to the window where he'd been standing when I first entered. The view stretched out before us, gardens and gates, and the long driveway leading back to the world beyond. He turned to face me fully, and slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. Not to pull me from danger this time, not to save me from falling, just an invitation. A choice offered freely, with no desperation or urgency. Just his hand, open and steady, waiting for mine. I looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd become my sanctuary, and I understood what he was really asking. Not just to stay for tonight or this week, but to step into this life with him, to choose the shadows and the safety, the violence and the vows, all of it together. I placed my hand in his, and his fingers closed around mine with absolute certainty. I've got you, he said, echoing the words he'd spoken on the bridge. But this time they meant something different, something deeper. I know, I whispered, and I'm not letting go either. We stood there as darkness fell, hands clasped, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new from the ruins. And for the first time since the night my car went through that guardrail, I wasn't afraid of falling. Because I knew, no matter what came next, Lorenzo would always be there to catch me, and I would always choose to take his hand.